It's been weeks since we had to do the unthinkable. We had to put things on hold. We had to cope with the new normal. We had to make great personal sacrifices, and we did. Ontario stepped up. We threw everything we had at this virus. We mobilized 14.5 million people in the fight against this virus. And together, we're taking the legs out from under it. My friends, thanks to our collective efforts, today we're prepared to announce the details of the next stage of reopening the economy. We're getting thousands of people back to work. We've laid a solid foundation for our economic reopening and recovery. We have the framework. We have the workplace safety guidelines. We have the capacity in our healthcare system.
The CBC's Mike Crawley is covering Doug Ford's announcement from the Ontario Legislature in Toronto today. He has more on what the province plans to reopen next week.
Next Tuesday will be Ontario's big grand reopening. That's when retail stores that are not in shopping malls will be allowed to have customers inside, and non-essential construction work will be able to resume. There's a long list of other economic sectors and business activities that will be allowed to resume their normal operations starting on Tuesday, and those include things like film and television, post-production work. There's also pet grooming services, veterinary services, things like that. As well, there's a plan to allow for the resumption of scheduled surgeries, but no specific date on that. It will depend basically on each individual hospital. Some odd choices in here, perhaps, of businesses that can open. The Ontario says that housekeepers and cooks or domestic services are allowed to resume. However, there is no lifting of Ontario's ban on social gatherings of more than 5 people from outside your household. On the recreational front, lots of scope for summertime and outdoor activities, as well as some individual sports. So activities like gymnastics and fencing and horse racing, tennis, all allowed to go ahead, but as long as there are no spectators in the stands. Starting on Saturday, at the beginning of the long weekend, marinas and golf courses will be allowed to open. Premier Doug Ford says that this stage is something that Ontario is ready for because people have observed the physical distancing rules and that it's a sign that the public health measures are working. The number of new cases announced today is actually the lowest it has been in Ontario since the very end of March. What happens after this going forward is a couple of weeks of watching and seeing what happens to those case numbers, and if there are any increases in the number of infections that we're seeing each day. And if that happens, Ontario could potentially pull back on some of these measures, but if the case numbers keep on going down, they could enter into the next phase of reopening, a broader reopening of things like businesses and offices, and that would happen no earlier than 2 weeks down the road from this stage 1 of reopening. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
We heard from Ontario's Chief Medical Officer last hour. Dr. David Williams explained why Ontario is moving into its next stage of reopening and what he'll be watching for over the next couple of weeks.
Over the last 2 weeks, we have seen if you look at the linear curve, a decrease in the cases. This one only but adds to that. Not that I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow went up again. It seems to do that. It comes down, then goes up by a bit, but each time it doesn't go up as much as the week before, and it just keeps downward trending. We flattened the curve. We planked the curve down to some extent, and so Ontarians did the job. They're still doing it. Now, as we're going to say, the next phase, as we open up with more things available to the public in outdoor venues, and you've got a list there, in other things that you may have a need, and a sense it's become over time essentiality as people feel desperate to get to do other things. They have to go out there, but you still have to do it with a button there and with a caveat, 6 foot distancing. If you can't maintain that, then wear a non-medical cloth mask in those settings where you know you probably may or will not be able to maintain that 6 foot distancing as more and more people come out in those settings. What we're trying to say in this phase coming up for the next 2 weeks is, while there's things more available, it doesn't mean you have to go out. While there's more things allowed to be open, it doesn't mean they will open. It depends on the retailer, the group, and that, if they want to do it, if they feel it's worthwhile doing it in that setting. So it's basically giving permission in stage 1 to do that, but you have to respect all the things we put in there that are still required.